So that white one, about 4 feet high there in the middle.
Over here, you see his wife's stone. You read it even, see, Lucy P.
Oh, is that the grave?
Yeah, well, his grave's over here.
It's on the right to that one.
Yeah, and his wife is Lucy.
Huh. So who are the church members buried here?
Pastor Cox and his wife and his grandson.
And this is where a nephew or somebody came and said somebody wanted to talk to him in the church?
Yeah, but invited him over to the preachers. He went in the field with a farmer and came back a preacher.
Huh. And that was that grove at the top of the hill there?
There's a chapel at the top of the hill. Right here.
Oh, is that the church he went to?
Yeah, that's what he built.
Well, we usually begin in here in his bedroom, well, which was his bedroom when he died. William Miller was born in Massachusetts, but he was 1782, but he moved here down the road, the house at the end of this road.
That's the house you were talking about then, huh?
You showed it to him?
I'm just telling him.
That's where he grew up. He was 4 years old when they moved there. And he was the oldest of 16 children. He had 10 children himself. When he came back from the war, I'll jump ahead a little bit and then I'll come back. He purchased this property and paid off his parents' farm also. He also commissioned this painting to be done of himself, and in the parlor is one of his wife, Lucy. Okay, William Miller went to school only spasmodically, as they did in those days, because they had to farm. And, but he loved to read, and he would borrow books from all the libraries. The first library in Vermont was up here at Pulteney, and he got a hold of the books up there after he married Lucy, and that's where he got into deism. He became a deist. A deist is one who believes that there is a God, but the God started things and left it all. And everybody does what they want to. And he didn't change his mind on that until after the Battle of Plattsburgh. He was in the civil work here. He was Justice of the Peace, and he was into politics a lot in the early 1800s until 1810. And then a group of neighbors here wrote, and we have the original document here. They said, and they signed their names, the men signed their names, if William Miller will go as our captain, we will go to the war. And Plattsburgh is just up north here. I don't know how many miles, you would know probably.
It's about 90 miles.
Yeah.
90 miles.
About 90 miles north here. And the British were coming in, trying to conquer. And so they needed soldiers, and he became captain. This is the beginning of the U.S. Navy, by the way, here in Whitehall. That's where it all began, was that battle. Because the British were coming down the St. Lawrence and down Lake Champlain. And what changed his mind during the battle was, here he had 3 or 4 men around him of his soldiers. The British sent a cannon, exploded right beside him. 3 of his men were killed, 1 was injured, and it never bothered him at all, it didn't hit him. And he, after that, wondered if there was a God who cared. And this was the beginning of his change from deism. He came home from the war. He attended the Baptist church just a little ways up the road here. It's no longer there. And his wife, of course, urged him to go up there. And while he was going there to church on Sundays, he would skip sometimes, and his wife would say, and his mother, "How come you skipped?" And he would say, "I can't stand it when the pastor is gone and one of the local men gets up to read because they make too many mistakes." And so his mother and wife got on the pastor and said, "Whenever you go, ask William to do it so he won't miss Sunday church." And that's what happened. And while he was up there reading some of these sermons, especially one in particular, it really affected him. And he said, you can sit down here. There is a God. And the sermon was on child training and how God, you are responsible for your children and they look at you and so forth. And so he changed his mind a little bit, and from there he began to come towards God. And then his deist friend said, "How come you're leaving, deism and going to Christianity, and prove it to us?" And so he decided he would sit down with only the Bible and the commentary and find out if there was a real God. And this is the room where he did most of his studying. This is his original bed. This cover was his mother's. It's real. I mean, I don't know if she made it or bought it or what. The mattress is corn husks. This is the original one. When our organization purchased this property, they discovered a lot of relatives in the area of William Miller, and they had these articles in their attics. This is one of them. Another one, it was that deacon's bench was his. This chair was his, except for the replacement here. And also this, I believe it's a horsehair rocker, belonged to William Miller. He built this house 1815, and also the barns. So that goes back quite a few years, over 150 years over. We don't know which concordance he used or which Bible, but this has turned out. This is a concordance with a date in it of 1844.
Wow.
Well, he wouldn't have used this but it could have been one very similar. Mm-hmm. That would have been a very small concordance, not like the big ones that came later, but that is interesting. Anyway, he was reading, and he started at Genesis, and he began going through. When he came to Daniel, he got very concerned because Daniel 8 talks about the sanctuary being cleansed after 2,300 days. He knew that was years because of the context. And the thinking then was that the sanctuary was this earth. And he naturally put it together and said, okay, Jesus is going to come, cleanse the earth after this time period of this prophecy. But he had to find the beginning. And that was easy in the next chapter. It gives the beginning, which was the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. And so he figured that out and came up with 1843. Now he was wrong there because, and he discovered the mistake shortly afterwards, that there's a year zero. So you need to add a year. So he corrected that and came up with the date of it, October 22, 1844. Actually, he didn't come up with October 22, someone else did. And he accepted it just a few weeks before that date. This is one of the original charts that he and the other ministers used. Now I should go back and say, he was sitting here and convinced, this was about 1830, and he felt constrained that he should share this message that Jesus was coming in 1843 and then 1844. And he didn't want to because he was a farmer. And he finally made a promise to God and said, okay, if you will have someone invite me to speak, I will share it. Well, it wasn't 15, 20 minutes later that there was a knock on the door. It was his nephew from Dresden. And the nephew said, Uncle William, will you come and share with our church what you've been studying? Their pastor had gone away for a trip, and they invited him. And he tore out of here, they say, over to the woods, and wrestled with the Lord and said, I didn't expect this so fast. Finally, however, he came back. He said, I've made a promise to the Lord, I will do it. And for the next, well, from about 31 to 1844, he delivered thousands of messages. In fact, there's a book out here now. We now have that lists the various cities that he traveled into during that time. Thousands of sermons, up into Canada even. And this was the chart that they had developed that they would speak from. This is not this is a copy of the original. We used to have the original one here on loan, but now we just have the copy. And so, okay, I should finish the story of William Miller before we go on for the rest of the house. He preached, and thousands. They say sometimes there were camp meetings out in the middle of nowhere where there were just thousands of people, and the trains would make special stops to let all these people out in order to go to the camp meeting, because these Millerites were just milling around thousands. He united with Joshua Himes, and Joshua Himes was a preacher, a city preacher, and he directed Miller, I guess we could say, and getting him into the cities. Miller was a farmer, a countryman, but Joshua Himes sort of took over and brought it into the whole city. Now, at the same time, I should say, in England, in South America, in parts of Europe, there were men who arose at the very same time with the same message, and they came up with almost the same date. In some cases, yes, some cases, you know, a little bit different. But it was an awakening around the world, because at that time, after the Reformation, people began to drift back into their worldly ways, and they needed an waking up. And according to the Bible, that would happen around this 1840 period. So, any questions? I've gone over it very speedily. I should finish the story, though. When 1844 happened, Miller, by that time, he was quite elderly, and he had Parkinson's disease or palsy or something. He was just very shaky. He did not go out to Ascension Rock, where we can take you out here. But his family and followers in this area, they say, on October 22, 1844, waited out there on that rock for Jesus to come all day long. He stayed here, they say. Whether he didn't quite believe the date, or whether he was, you know, that's rather sickly, he died in 1849. That was just a few years before that. When 1844, October 22 happened, and Jesus did not come, the Baptist church down here said, we will not worship with these Millerites anymore. So they came up to this little red schoolhouse which you passed, and they worshiped there. And then they said, that's a Baptist church, why shouldn't we move out? Let's kick the Millerites out. So they went back, and they kicked the Millerites out and said, you go find someplace else to worship, but you can't worship with us. So the Millerites came to the little red schoolhouse and held their meetings until 1848, when Miller built the chapel that is up here. Now, the owner of that Little Red Schoolhouse this year has turned the deed over to this organization, and this summer they're going to restore it as a Little Red Schoolhouse.
Nice.
Oh yes, so the followers went to worship in the chapel that he had built, and then shortly after that, 1 year later, he died. He died in this bed. The night before, he went out to the kitchen. The kitchen was around the corner, and one of his pastors, his fellow Millerite pastors, was here, and they had a little meeting, and then he came in here and died. it was his request that the funeral be held in the chapel. Well, you haven't seen the chapel yet, but it's very small. It wouldn't hold everybody. There were 100 horse-drawn sleighs with people in it following the hearse to the cemetery. Did you show them the cemetery down here? And so they held the funeral service in Fairhaven at the Congregational Church, which is still standing there. So, let me see. This house was purchased by Adventist Heritage Ministries in 1984, and there's a picture outside around the corner there of what it looked like when they got it. It would look very bad. They had pictures when Miller was living, how it looked, and they have restored it, and you're one of them who, I understand, restored part of this house. A lot of people came and worked on this house. Originally, this was a kitchen around the corner, and over here where the museum is were 2 bedrooms, I understand it.
Yeah.
Now let's go into the parlor here then.
Yeah, in 1883, I tried to buy the house.
Did you really?
Yeah, because they didn't want me to buy it. I turned it over to them.
Oh.
But if you know the church wanted it, they checked the price way up.
Oh, I
But
see.
they wanted $40,000.
Okay.
So I came up prepared to buy it for $40,000.
Okay.
But they had found out the Adventist wanted it before that.
Okay.
When I got here, it was $140,000.
Oh, no kidding. Well, originally this was right here was a huge fireplace. Down in the basement there you can still see the foundation of this huge fireplace, which evidently he did. This stairway was not here. This was put in probably by his son later, when the son inherited it. The doorbell is interesting, I think.
Yeah.
You want to explain it?
Yeah.
If you turn the handle on the outside, it pulls this wire and rings the bell.
Huh.
This room was the parlor when William Miller lived. The interesting thing here is the floor. The design was painted. I had an antique dealer in here one day touring, and he said they used pig's blood to do that painting with.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the furniture here was not William Miller's, but it belonged to William Miller's daughter, Lucy, the one who you saw him going out to the maple grove when he was asked first to preach.
Lucy's house is up here, just around the corner.
Yes, it is, on the next road up. That's correct. This is that time period, however. I doubt if William Miller had anything that elegant, however, frankly. I doubt it very much. Okay. That's the painting of his wife that he had done after he came back from Plattsburgh, Battle of Plattsburgh. This is a recent display. This is about the Battle of Plattsburgh, and he makes a statement here, it's just been delivered this week, that in that battle, the blood, he said, ran knee deep or something. It's terrible. It was terrible with the British. Now the British had 15,000 trained soldiers. The Americans had, I think it was 5,000 and 2,000 farmers or something. Yeah. So on the other, here's a picture of the schoolhouse. On the other side of this, you may want to look at that. I didn't know until the other day that William Miller was a part of the underground, the slavery, freeing the slaves, and so there's some information on the other side about his work for the slaves. Here is the original water pump, and I believe that has something to do with the plunger for it. There's an old picture here of the house when he was living here. Here's this book, yeah. This shows all the towns. This we just delivered this week. Towns, churches that he visited and preached in. Oh, it's in process.
That's new to me.
Oh yeah, yeah. And oh yes, when in 1984 they found this, they bought this place. The director of White Estate at that time, Paul Gordon, was here, and they wondered what was in the attic. Were you here? Was it in the attic?
No.
And so they, I guess, found their way through a little hole in the attic, and they found these two big wooden barrels. And they understand were full of handwritten documents by William Miller during his days of justice of the peace. Now these documents here,
they were too big to come down through the hole.
they had to make.
We had to take out the little run in.
I saw a picture of that here somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of these documents here came out of those barrels, but most of the documents were given to the local historical society because they were justice of the peace items. This is one of his notebooks, however, that he wrote in. Let me see. This is the document with the signatures of the men who said, if William Miller will be our captain, we'll go to war. That's an original. This is interesting also. This is a picture of William Miller when he was young. This was his mother's, and behind it is a lock of his baby's hair. Some of the relatives gave us that.
These are the blinds from his horse.
With the M on it.
It's with them on it.
This is a piece of the original wallpaper that was in there.
It's all been wallpaper since I was there last.
Is it?
Yeah.
I can't remember that doctor did it.
Pete Jensen.
Yeah, he did. He did all of that. Yeah. These are the original floorboards here, but from here on, no. This is added by other people. And there's the original walls showing how they used to do the walls were here.
There's a little butter churn.
Yeah, the butter churn.
Did you help find that butter churn?
No, I don't know where that did come from.
It says
Found in
found
the
in the
attic,
attic.
it says.
In the attic, yeah. I know there was more up there than these barrels. I wasn't here when they got the rest of the stuff out.
Now these timbers, I find this interesting.
Yeah.
That's one piece of wood.
One board.
That
It
was
was
a
up in the
big
barn.
tree.
That was a big tree. And some of these trees, by the way, they've taken a bore through it and found that they were old enough they would have been there when William Miller lived here. So big old maple trees. Let me see, what else? This is all about his work for the slaves coming through, and that was all new to me. I didn't realize.
It was the main wall here of the house.
Was it?
This is the little lean-to out here, see?
This was a dining room, right? Wasn't it?
This was the main wall here, though.
And that was bedrooms.
And I had to jack it up. It was sagging so bad. We had a 20-ton jack under it. We had all we do was pick it up.
And they had to take off, here, this picture's interesting. They had to take off this whole chimney.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't here when William Miller was here.
Yeah.
And then they put in this here. This section here, up here is where the hired hand would sleep. And there is, right in here, there is a fold-up stairway that still works.
Yeah. Like this building was spreading so bad, I put a big rod right through the.
Is that right?
You can see it upstairs yet.
Oh, really?
It's on the floor. Yeah.
And, well, the roof on the barns were sagging too. They had to do those.
Yeah.
And this was the kitchen, and they had, I believe, in here, or this was the dining room, and here's the kitchen.
The kitchen here, see the spot here?
Okay.
They had an old sink right here. And that's where the pipe.
Oh, that's what that was. Well, good. I'm going to go there.
It was made of wood and some kind of a metal sink, and it was all.
But didn't they have an outdoor oven and stuff too?
Yeah.
That was because there's a door here.
Yeah.
There's a door out here.
Yeah.
There's a door right there that went outside.
Yeah. This floor used to sag so bad it would shake. I dug a hole in it and cut a hole through the floor and got underneath there and shorted it up.
This is used now as our storage area, and this was, we were using it as a little garage for the Miller golf cart here, but it was the woodshed originally. Any questions?
Anything else we can see while we're here at some of the outbuildings? Or
You can see, if you want to see the barns, there's snow. We can go to the chapel. Let you in there.
Sure, that'd be
And
great.
we can go to.
Sometime when you're reading, you might want to read that.
Miracles of Life. Oh, that's you.
That's
Oh,
me.
I will read it. I didn't even realize that was what you... Oh, I didn't know who Len Taylor was. Oh, good.
I got one home. I'll give you one.
All right, I'd like to read that.
Good. Oh, I can show you in here the foundation of the old fireplace.
Yep.
And downstairs, there's some hand cut beams, it looks like, holding this place up, and rocks around there.
Yeah. There's a cistern underneath here, where they used to underneath the sink here, underneath the, where they run roof water into what you use that for water here. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You can see it down there. It's still there.
Oh. Which church do you go to?
Kingsbury.
Kingsbury. Okay, I've never been down there.
Oh,
I've been to Rutland.
What's your name again?
Rick.
Rick.
Yeah.
Where you're from?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Okay, I need to go up and get a coat.
Okay.
A place like this, everybody knows everybody, I guess.